My name is Carlin Burke. I'm a collage artist and I live in Minnesota. I graduated in painting back in 1967, and I've been doing collages since then. So I'm a pretty old hand at doing collages. I'm not an old hand at doing videos, but I'm going to do my best because I'm hoping to share a lot of ideas about collages, how you can do them beyond just cutting out pictures out of a magazine and putting them together. There's so many different mediums and techniques that are so interesting in collages. And so most of my episodes are going to be about using a particular medium or different technique of how to create a collage. I do collages everywhere from small trade card size all the way up to big 24 by 24s. And I would do bigger collages if my studio was bigger. As you can see, it's a small studio and kind of cramped. But doing collage work has been really important in my career as a working artist. So I'm hoping to share these materials with you, and in this first episode I'm going to show you some of the materials that I use, basically just to give you an idea of what upcoming episodes will be. I'm hoping that you will contact me. I'm putting on my social media contact information, and I'm hoping that you'll subscribe to the channel and get a hold of me and tell me if you've had some interesting experiences with your collages, how you might do them, ideas, things you want to learn, because I do want to make this an interactive series. And I called it Collage Safari because hopefully we can explore together all the different ways of doing a collage. Okay, you can see I've put out a lot of materials. I'm not going to go into depth about each of these materials and how to do them because that's what future videos will be. I'll select a different aspect of materials and then try to explain how to use them, how maybe mixing them together, and how you can create a painting out of collage work. I usually start out with paint. I usually use acrylic because that's kind of a good base and you can mix it. I often use a lot of white when I'm mixing it, and I start out experimenting. Sometimes I'll pick a color that maybe I'm not going to use. Maybe it's one that I haven't used very often, but I give myself a challenge by putting any old color on top of it and then working away and changing it as I go. So that's just kind of a way of keeping things fresh as I'm using the paint. Another paint that I'll use is called Flash, which is a vinyl paint, and it comes in beautiful colors, but it's very flat compared to most of your acrylics. I tend to like a flat finished product when I'm working on this because I think it makes the papers lay down good. Another paint that can be used is oil paint, such as these oil painting sticks. The difficulty of oil paint sticks is that while they're really exciting to use, you want to know that you've got a base, like maybe this oil pad or some kind of gesso canvas behind it before you use it. But because it will soak through over time, that oil will show oily spots on the back. These are just some marks I made on top of an old mono print just for experimenting with it and trying out the tubes. I will probably date it so I know how long it took for this to dry on the surface. One thing difficulty about using the oil is you can put oil mark and oil paint on top of anything acrylic, like on a gesso base or whatever, but you can't do the reverse. You can't paint in oil and then go to acrylic or try to do your paper. If I were to glue some kind of paper thing on top of this, it would probably soak through. So I might have to put a varnish on top of this so that I could have a layer in between and be able to protect whatever collage item I put on top. But it's a rather exciting marker to be able to use. Another thing that I enjoy using, but again, you have to use this in sparingly because it can get rather gaudy, is using metal leaf. And I've really enjoyed using metal leaf. Sometimes I'll put quite a bit on and then paint right over it or just use part of it when I'm done. These are just samples that I put together. I glued them down so that I could see what they really look like when they were out of the package. It's very difficult sometimes to see them in the package. So that would be metal leaf. In order to do that, first you have to put sizing, which is basically a glue for metal leaf. It's a water-based glue. It's very easy to apply. And then after you do apply that, because we call this metal leaf because, okay, we might call it gold leaf. The only thing is it is not real gold. I mean, if you can afford real gold leaf materials, it's very expensive. And most people use that for refinishing frames or furniture or something like that. But just in a painting, it would be too expensive to do. So when you use a metal leaf, you do have to varnish it or it will tarnish. And so this is a product that I use, Golden makes. One is the solvent, which then will make the varnish a little thinner so you can use it. So I use a little pimento container. I mix it there until I get the consistency that I want, that it's not too thick or not too thin. And I only do a little bit at a time because otherwise you just get too much and you don't need all that. And you'll be sorry that you've mixed that much. Another thing that I might do is I might use block print. I might do a little mono print. And then after I do that, as you saw, you can draw over it or you can paint over it, or I can turn that mono print into an abstract shape of a color that I've chosen to use. When I finish my paintings, I do usually coat them with a matte varnish, a golden matte varnish, but this one is a top coat that's UV protection for color, and that's kind of very good for the paper materials that you might have in a collage. It is a semi-gloss, and then I usually put a matte gloss on top. Obviously, to do collages, you have to have glue. A lot of people use Mod Podge glue. There's many different glues. I happen to use this bookbinder glue, which is really strong. It's it's a neutral pH for it. It's like I say, it's expensive, so you don't really have to do this. When you do glue something with this, boy, it really sticks down. And one thing that's kind of interesting about when you glue something down, you're not doomed to keep it. Sometimes ripping it up ends up being a much more interesting background than you had in the first place. So that might be something to do. I rarely use a stick glue, but when I do, let's say I have a corner that's sticking up and I want to glue it down or just touch up something, I will use this glue, and this is the one that I found I really like. It's Scholastica makes it, and what I like about it, it goes on nice and creamy, it's very smooth, but the best thing is it doesn't dry out in the tube like most of these stick glues do, and that you spend a lot of money on them and they just dry out the next time you go to use it. So that's a pretty frustrating deal. Another material I might use is Citrusolve. You can dissolve a lot of newspapers or paper with this and use the color that results from it. Not all magazines will be destroyed and turn into a nice interesting pattern with Citrusolve, but some will. And I will use the Citrusolve as well as Xylene in order to do a transfer drawing, and that will happen. Now, in the old days, back in 1967, we used to use lighter fluid. It's really hard to find that original lighter fluid that comes like in a little oil can. In the old days, you used to put it in the back of your lighter. Now the butane lighters are all different, and it's a different material. But Xylene does the product. It is flammable, and so you have to be pretty careful. And I used to always kind of worry about that with lighter fluid, but this is better when it comes to flammability. So that's another product. When I'm mixing paint or mixing colors, well, what I do is I save my old Chobani. And the nice thing about that is that these are easy to wash out, and there's something about the plastic that allows you to really wash them out pretty good. If you forget, and it gets all caked and cruddy and you don't like it, well, hey, it was free. Throw it out. No big loss. You don't have to go buy an expensive mixing palette for anything. These smaller ones are even more my favorite. They're very small, but they're kind of nice for mixing colors. These are actually dog food containers of a small, like a dog pate, for small dogs. I have a big German Shepherd, so this is only a topping for him, but I saved them. They're also excellent for bringing to workshops because I don't have to worry about losing them or them getting all ruined or something, because again, they're cheap and they're free and they're gone. I throw them away. So it's not really a problem. When I'm doing a collage and I rip up a paper example or I'm pasting it down, I might damage the surface and be disappointed that some of the color has been torn away. So then I can use my watercolor pencils to either touch up that damage, match it up, touch it up, or let's say I have something where I'm not really fond of the color exactly the way it is. I can change the color by using these color pencils. So I really kind of like having those on hand, almost more as a protective situation if I need to change the color. Another thing is transfer. We're going to do some transfer images. This one is not completed yet. I had started it at a workshop to show people how to do a transfer. And in this case, it's only partially. I kind of liked it, so I saved it. And I thought, well, I'm going to somehow reuse this at some point. And underneath it, I don't know if you can tell, I did use some iridescent paints. I rarely use that. One thing about using iridescent or gold leaf, metal leaf, is that you don't want to get so gimmicky with these different materials because they can end up being gaudy and not beautiful at all. So that's a thing you have to really restrain yourself sometimes. Of course, we all know that we're going to do paper, people cutting out images. I really like to look for abstract images. I like to create a painting that maybe like this one does happen to have mags. This is not even finished yet, but I had done a painting. I'd actually sanded it down. I use sandpaper quite a bit when I don't like a surface, and then I glue it down. So I will use magazines occasionally this way, but I usually try to do them in a very abstract format, not as just little pictures of people and things in my collages, but try to choose for color. So we will probably have an episode that deals with color. Another episode is going to be about public domain. This is a great knife, and what a great color. However, this may be in the public domain, so I don't want to cut this out. And I have a whole episode that talks about public domain so that you're not violating somebody's copyright when you do use a magazine material. Of course, then there's basic papers like this. You can get something, these handmade papers. You can purchase them. Again, you don't want to get too gaudy with them. Maybe this would be more distracting, but you could use part of it. And another thing you can do is choosing something like this overlay and put it on top of something, and you get a wonderful texture. So this is another handmade paper, which is also fun to use. When I am gluing, because the glue can be pretty messy, is that I found one of my favorite products for gluing things is parchment paper. It doesn't stick to everything. It really can be reused over and over again. It's much better than wax paper. It really helps. And if you do that, when, for example, if I've pasted down something and I want to press it in, I will put this between my hand and the paper so I won't damage the paper when I'm rubbing down on it, and this will protect it. So parchment paper is an excellent thing to have on hand when you're doing gluing. And so those are some of the materials. And of course, the most important thing is all your scissors. I use a lot of small scissors. I usually use a Fiskar scissor. This one is a curved one, which I haven't liked so much. I also use the 4-inch, the 5-inch, and a bigger one if I have to cut large sheets from it. And I found a new scissor called Kai. So I'll show you some of those different scissors and the use of those different scissors. The one thing I rarely use is a mat knife, because I find that as I'm cutting, I might end up snagging the paper. And so it has to be a very sharp blade. The only time I might use it if I really have to cut something down a straight line and I want it to be something where rather than have a scissor. So we're going to talk about cutting with scissors and some of the ways to cut curves better so you have a better product when you're done. So those are just some of the things that we're going to look into, and I hope that you will send me some of your ideas. Maybe there's some materials that you use.